Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Reus, editor-at-large with EQ, and I'm here today with Leib Dodell of Bar K to talk about pets and designing experiences and scalable businesses around them and this kind of hyper-local, hyper-community-focused economy that's emerging. Welcome, Leib.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Leib launched Bar K in Kansas City. They're expanding, including a location that will be opening in 2021 here in St. Louis, but also in other cities. Leib, what is Bar K?
So it is hard to condense into a little elevator pitch, but it's a unique and joyful destination for dog lovers. And what we've done is created really a brand new community of people and dogs all coexisting in a thoughtfully designed space. It's really one of those things that you have to experience to really appreciate. We've had a lot of people tell us that they've been through the website, they've seen videos, and until they saw it in person, it really didn't hit them just how brand new the experience is.
I've had the privilege of being at Bar K in Kansas City. Talk about what details of design make something be a great place for people and dogs.
We've got a 2-acre space, so it's a very large campus, and we had 350,000 human visitors, 250,000 dogs, so 250,000 dogs come through the space. And everybody says, what do you do about all the fights and the conflict? And we have virtually none of that, and it's because of how thoughtfully designed the space is. And we spent a lot of time working with experts, dog trainers, veterinarians, behaviorists. What can we do to make this space joyful? And I know this sounds like sort of a little bit out there, but if you create a joyful space, the dogs will feed off that, and they just relax, and the people relax, and what you have is then just a joyful experience. So, for example, we were very careful to design the park that there's no corners where a dog can feel trapped, where the fences are an appropriate height. Those are my dogs. You hear barking in the background, so it's joyful in my house as well. So every detail of the space was really carefully engineered. Once people come to our space and they see the attention that was paid to every detail, they just relax because they know that we've thought about everything and that we're going to keep them and their pets safe. And it really has an impact.
Tell us your origin story.
Yeah, so my background, I had a normal job in life. I was an attorney. I was in the insurance industry. I was working in an office every day, until I was 50 years old. And I always felt like there had to be something more. And I was also a dog person. I was sort of well known in my circle of friends as the crazy dog guy, and I'd always try to bring my dogs with me to events and places, often inappropriately, and it was because there were very few appropriate places where you could go with your dog. We think of ourselves as this very dog-friendly culture and dog-friendly society, but really we're not. There are very few places where you can go, and all of us as dog lovers are very accustomed to getting kicked off of patios and kicked out of Targets and kicked off elevators and everything, and it never made any sense to me. And I would take my dogs to public dog parks, which are great, and we're all grateful that we have parks departments that create public dog parks. But every single time I was at a dog park, I was struck by how limited the experience was. There was no gatekeeper. There were no lights. There was no comfortable place to sit. There was certainly no place to get a drink or a bite to eat or work on your laptop. There was no Wi-Fi. And yet they were packed. And so I'd be sitting there scratching my head going, number one, why is nobody enhancing this experience? And number two, in our economy, in theory, money is supposed to flow into a vacuum, and that sure felt like a vacuum to me. And so why wasn't anybody monetizing this experience? And so, finally, about 5 years ago, I just said, the heck with this. I'm just going to do this. And, left my career, literally just took that proverbial leap off the cliff. And from that point forward, I've been working full time on making this concept a reality of this really, really creative, safe space for people and dogs to congregate together.
There's this idea that the pet business, it's really friendly to solopreneurs and people working independently, but I don't think people necessarily always see a successful business that grows to have a staff that has benefits, that you have a huge real estate footprint. You talked about 2 acres, liquor licenses, and all of those kinds of things. Talk a little bit about how big Bar K is as an operation to give us a sense of what's possible to scale.
Yeah, it's a hugely complicated operation. In some ways, the fact that I was on a third career, really, and I had a background in law and a background in insurance, and all those things helped me because we had so many regulatory hurdles that we had to clear. Just the idea of combining a restaurant with a dog park, right? All of the health department folks just kind of look at you like you want to do what? And most people would probably be surprised to know that in the standard food code that's promulgated by the FDA and that's adopted in most jurisdictions around the country, it's illegal to have a dog even on a leash on an outdoor patio if food is served. I'm sure it surprises most of our listeners. And it's one of those things that's honored in the breach. As they say, people tend to look the other way, but it's actually not legal, and unless either the municipality or the state has modified it, as some are starting to do, but in general, it's not legal. So in Kansas City, it's not legal. I had to spend 6 months in negotiating with our local health department to get a variance. We have 14 conditions that we have to meet in order to be able to do this legally. So I think, like, technically, we're probably the only place in town that can legally have dogs on their patio, even though it's done all over town all the time. And that's just one of dozens of similar challenges. So, the operation, it's complex. We've got 2 bars, an inside bar, an outside bar. We have a stage where we regularly have music performances, dog-friendly. Dogs run up on the stage and, mingle with the artist. And we bring in speakers on animal health issues, environmental issues. We have a grooming salon. We have a separate space called Pet Finder Park where we have adoption events, and we have over 100 employees. Most of them are part-time and seasonal. So it is definitely grown beyond, I think, all of our expectations when we first launched the business. But what it does is create this really sticky community. I mean, people, we're membership driven. So we want people to become a member of Barquet. That not only allows us to drive revenue from membership, but it also allows us to know exactly who the dogs are that are in the park at all times because they get a membership card, they check in. We know their breed, their age, their birthday. We know that they're vaccinated. We know who their vet is if there's an incident where we need to reach out. So that's the basic model. And we have now a database of like over 80,000 records of dogs that we have all this data on, which adds another potential revenue stream to the business. So it's become quite a large operation. So the really cool thing is that we have, almost infinite opportunities to scale, and I like to say both horizontally and vertically. So what I mean by that is we have the opportunity to scale horizontally by taking this experience and then introducing it to new geographical markets. So as I think you mentioned, we're already in development in St. Louis. We have this just unbelievably cool site in the neighborhood called The Grove. We're going to repurpose a beautiful old 56,000 square foot warehouse. We have a second project in development in Oklahoma City, where the city has offered us 2 acres of land right on their riverfront in what they call their boathouse district. So we're already in that horizontal expansion mode. Our goal is to be in 10 markets in 5 years. We really want to be the premier brand in what we're calling dog-human recreation. But then, often overlooked is this idea of vertical expansion, meaning that now that we have these communities where we are viewed now as a trusted resource for all things pet, we have huge volume of people coming to our space and spending the average dwell time at Barquet is 2.5 hours. So now you have the opportunity to offer them other products and services, so retail, boarding. Right now we don't do any daycare or boarding. We're about being present with your dog, but our guests are asking us like, man, I'm going out of town. I wish I could leave my dog at Barquet. My dog is comfortable with the space. Your staff knows my dog and vice versa. So that gives us the opportunity now to add a boarding element, a daycare element, and on and on and on.
You also mentioned that you collect a lot of data. Like a lot of the people that are our regular readers and listeners, think about customer churn and monthly recurring revenue and all of those kinds of things. Talk a little bit about how are you building a community where you're actually adding a lot of lifetime value.
Value is the right word. I mean, I've been in lots of different businesses. Just as a value creation engine, this is like the most powerful thing I've really ever seen. We're at the front end of this cusp of the explosion of the pet industry generally, where I think everybody knows the pet industry is growing rapidly. It's somewhere around $80 billion. It's growing quicker than the consumer segments generally. It's generally considered, I think, correctly to be, if not recession-proof, at least recession-resistant, because people will continue to spend on pets. So we have all of that going for us. And then we've built this model now where, as you point out with the membership, our memberships are subscriptions, so that's recurring revenue. And we have just barely scratched the surface of retail. Right now, 70% of our revenue is food and beverage. Then another 20% comes from membership sales and guest entry. So in order to come in with a dog, you either buy an annual membership or you buy a day pass. Kind of think like you're going to a nice fitness center, right? For $10 or $15, you can buy a day pass. But over time, that dependence on food and beverage revenue will go down, right? Which is good because food and beverage revenue is notoriously, first of all, thin margins and second of all, fickle. So we want to become less dependent on that and more dependent on these other products and services like grooming, like daycare, like boarding, like dog training. I mean, dog training is a growing segment and it's exactly what our guests want. And we offer a safe space where they can train with their dog, work with a professional trainer, while having a drink at the same time. So it's almost infinitely scalable. We're also able to build this sense of community all at the same time. So we've got all these local partnerships with local businesses, a local hardware store, a local rock climbing club, a local distillery. And they all want to get their brand in front of our customers and in a very authentic way because they know how long people are dwelling at Barquet and it's a joyful experience. So it's this idea that's very fashionable among marketing officers of experiential marketing, where you're not just slapping a logo up somewhere. So as a perfect example, we have a partnership with Westlake Ace Hardware where they built we designed it, but they funded the construction of our doggy jungle gym. This is very unique play structure that we designed just for what dogs like to do with different ramps and stairs and different platforms at different elevations. And the dogs, honestly, you have to see it to believe it. They play on it exactly the same way a young child would play on a human jungle gym. They get it. They love it. They run up and down the stairs and jump from platform to platform. And then Westlake Ace Hardware has their logo on it. And we even do this thing called Westlake Toy of the Month where there's a little plexiglass case on the jungle gym that every month it features a different toy that's available at their hardware store. So it allows them to market their brand and their products, but in a highly experiential way that doesn't feel like advertising crammed down your throat. It feels much more engaging, and that's powerful. And so we've barely scratched the surface of those kind of experiential marketing partnerships. There's an almost infinite number of potential opportunities there.
How do you raise investment for this? Because I'm assuming you don't go to Silicon Valley. You also don't go to a bank. Who invests in this, and how do you raise capital for these?
Well, so that's a long story. We could do a whole podcast on that. It's, probably one of the hardest parts. Again, I had the advantage of being far along in my career. I wouldn't have been able to do this if I were the 25-year-old me with an idea, because we did go to a bank and we were able to get a decent-sized SBA loan. But it's only because I had the assets to put up to collateralize that. We also did a classic friends and family seed equity round where we went to people, mostly literal friends and family, but some other just business people in the community and said, here's what we want to do. And, we had a very professional business plan and a professional pitch deck, and we were able to raise about $650,000 in equity investment at the outset, just based on the idea. So that's how the original facility got built with that. And then once we had it up and running, kind of the more success you have, then the easier it gets. And so as you know, we were able to recruit a very well-known strategic pet industry company to come in as an investor, and that elevated our profile because once you have the kind of credibility, if you can get through the due diligence of a large publicly traded company that, everybody kind of feels much more comfortable tagging along, and you build it up that way. We're actually doing our third round, what we call our Series A round right now, to finance our expansion into these other markets. So you just got to take it one step at a time and don't rule out banks. The SBA is there for a reason, and I think every young entrepreneur should, not rule out the possibility of getting financing. Don't be scared of it. It can be terrifying. When you sign those documents, I literally had to sign documents pledging my retirement account as security, but that's what it takes. You have to go all in on these projects if you really want to see them through. Before we started the podcast, just so listeners know, Dan described me as a curmudgeon, and it's something I wear with honor. Like I'm the sort of cranky old Jewish guy saying, when I was your age, but it's become fashionable, I feel, among younger entrepreneurs to dabble. Like you got 3 or 4 things that you're working on, and hey, I've gotten doing this recording thing, and I've got my dog walking business, and then I'm making T-shirts, and then we'll see which one sticks. And I get it, which is in a different economy than we used to be 40 years ago. But to me, that's not a recipe for success. You got to decide which one of those things is your best case scenario, and then put 100% of your resources and your effort into it. That's just my humble opinion as an entrepreneur myself.
What can people learn from you about building a profitable and scalable and translatable community? So you can scale in Kansas City, but you can also scale in these other markets that you can grow it. What does that look like that applies to things outside of running a dog park and restaurant?
So yeah, it's hard because to us, we're so focused on that relationship between the person and the dog and being really the only destination in town. So, I mean, outside of that space, I think that's what you have to think is what makes my business, my destination, my whatever it is unique, right? Again, I seem to just fall naturally into the curmudgeon role, but it's not like replicating something that exists already. Like, oh, there's no yoga studio between 49th Street and 70th Street, so let me do a yoga studio. I mean, okay, that's pretty modest. You're not really adding much to the life experience by doing that. Like, what can I create that's brand new? Because that experience is what's going to get people coming back. And so I have a theory, about COVID, and to just mention, like, people are probably wondering, like, how have we been impacted by COVID? And it's actually surprising and extraordinary that our revenue is actually up post-COVID, which would blow people's minds, especially anybody that's in the hospitality business. And it's not because we're being irresponsible or taking it lightly. We're not at all. We have capacity limits. We required masks even before the city told us. It's because we offer this unique outdoor experience where people can spread out over 2 acres, feel very safe, and still have a joyful social encounter. They can meet friends. They can get their dog out for some exercise. And it's not that we're smart. It's just that we're incredibly lucky to have a business model that just allows us to not just survive, but thrive in this kind of an environment. So I would just challenge everybody. It's like the old thing about what's your why? Like, what problem are you solving as an entrepreneur? We were very, very laser focused in solving this problem. I've got nowhere to go with my dog that feels safe, where I can engage with friends in a safe, thoughtfully designed space. The few restaurants that allowed us on their patio was a terrible experience. The dog was on a leash under a table with getting side-eye from other diners. And then I already explained the public dog park experience was limited. And so there was really nothing. And so we were very, very clear that that's the problem that we were solving. And I think that's what all entrepreneurs, regardless of what sector you're in, what, industry, like, you got to have a tremendous amount of clarity around what problem it is you're solving. And if it's a real problem that other people have and you solve it really smartly, then you're going to have a built-in customer base and you're going to be able to survive, unexpected things like a global pandemic. Because we have the luxury of being in this pet space where we're just in exactly the right industry at exactly the right time.